Empty your mind and become stronger. Once, in a quiet village nestled between hills that wore morning mist like old shawls, there lived a young girl named Elia. Her home was small, with cracked windows that caught the golden sun just right, and a wooden porch that creaked kindly beneath her feet. Elia was not known for riches, nor for loud adventures. What she had was something gentler, more lasting, a heart that listened. She listened to the wind in the trees, to the old stories. The river told when it slipped past smooth stones, to the laughter of children echoing off rooftops, and even to the silence that sometimes fell like a blanket after the rain. She lived simply, planting herbs by her windowsill, helping her aging neighbor tie bundles of firewood, and mending her father's coat with careful stitches. But one morning, and these are the kinds of mornings that stories are built from, she woke with a feeling. It wasn't loud, just a small stirring, like a soft knock on the inside of her chest, a whisper, barely there, that said, "Go." And so she did. With her worn basket on one arm and her hose in the other, for she preferred the feel of earth on her feet, she stepped outside just as the sky began to blush with the promise of day. "I go to the market," she said softly, more to the sky than to anyone else. But the wind heard, the trees paused, even the old cat sleeping on the doorstep opened one eye as if to say, "This is not an ordinary day." Elia followed a path she thought she knew, the one that wound past the bakery with the braided bread, past the stone well where gossip swirled like water, and down to the marketplace with the stalls and shouting vendors. But today, her feet turned differently. They followed not the road paved by carts and feet, but a small trail that curved behind the orchard, through a tangle of blackberry bushes and over a quiet stream. She didn't remember this path from before, but somehow it felt familiar, like a song she'd heard in a dream. The deeper she walked, the quieter the world became. Birds sang in melodies she didn't recognize. The trees seemed older, wiser. Time, it seemed, had forgotten this place. And then she saw it. A clearing opened before her like a breath, wide and round, with trees that formed a perfect circle, their trunks tall and glowing with moss and mystery. In the center stood a market, but not a market made of wood and nails and cloth. No, this market was alive. The stalls were woven from vines that shifted gently with the wind, their roofs made of leaves that shimmered gold and silver, even though no sun shone through. Tables floated inches above the ground, and the air smelled not of spices or meat, but of memory, the kind of scent that makes you stop and try to remember a face you loved or a laugh you once heard in childhood. There were no shouts, no bargains being yelled, just a hum, a low, steady hum like the heartbeat of the earth. Elia stepped forward. She passed a stall where a woman in a dress stitched from starlight offered jars labeled "First Laugh," "Last Hug," and "What Might Have Been." Another booth displayed bundles of courage wrapped in parchment beside small pouches labeled "Kindness for a Rainy Day." A man with eyes like mirrors handed out invisible maps that led not to places, but to answers. and every item, every single one, was traded not for coins or goods, but for truths. To buy a memory, one had to offer a regret. To take a dream, one must give up a fear. To hold a jar of joy, you must let go of the sorrow you've been hiding in your chest for years. Elia wandered, not to shop, but to see, really see, what this place meant. She realized this was not a market for things, but for the soul, a place where burdens could be unburdened, and the pieces of ourselves we thought lost could be found again, quietly, without fuss. At one stall, an old woman smiled and said, "You don't have to buy anything. Sometimes it's enough just to remember who you are." So Elia sat beneath a tree, listening. She listened to stories whispered in the wind, stories of travelers who came here broken and left whole, of kings who gave up their crowns for a moment of peace, of children who traded nightmares for songs. She felt her heart swell and soften all at once, as if it too had been waiting for this place. When the sky began to shift, not darkening but shimmering, she knew it was time to go. The market, as magical things do, does not stay forever. It comes only to those who are truly seeking. And just as quietly as she arrived, Aaliyah turned and walked back along the path, her basket not heavy with goods, but with something far more valuable: peace, clarity, and a knowing that the world is wider and kinder than we often believe. She returned home as the stars blinked awake, her cottage still and familiar. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. The village looked the same. The cat still slept. The wind still rustled the garden herbs. But now, Elia walked slower. She listened deeper. And in her heart, she carried the echo of the market, a market that appears only when you need it most, when your spirit is ready, and when you finally say the simple words that begin every great journey. The path Elia took seemed to grow softer beneath her bare feet, as though the ground itself welcomed her. With every step, she felt a gentle warmth rise through her soles, like the earth was humming a tune meant only for her. The trees above whispered quietly to one another, their leaves rustling like distant laughter. Even the wind had changed, no longer cold or sharp, but calm, cradling her like a lullaby from a mother she never knew. Elia walked slowly, not because she was afraid, but because something in her heart whispered, "This is sacred ground." The air was different here. She noticed it smelled like old books and fresh rain, the kind of scent that reminds you of stories long forgotten and promises not yet made. Birds with feathers like falling petals watched her from the branches, their eyes curious but kind. Some fluttered close, circling her head in slow spirals before darting off, as if testing whether she was truly awake or merely dreaming. And then, just as the last thought slipped from her mind, she stepped into the market of hidden things. It was not loud. There was no clamor, no shouts, no clang of coins or bark of barter. Instead, it was quiet, a hush of wonder, like the moment right before snow falls. The market shimmered softly under a light that didn't seem to come from the sun, but from within. As though every stall, every person, every object glowed with its own quiet magic. The tents were made of silk that flowed like water, stitched not with thread but with moonlight. The stalls floated just a breath above the ground, their tables woven from branches, vines, and dreams. At the first stall, Elia saw a woman sitting very still, her face lined with age, but bright with something softer than joy, something like knowing. Before her lay dozens of glowing bottles, each pulsing with a soft, inner light. Their labels read things like, "The moment you first felt brave," "The day you almost gave up," and "The smile you forgot you gave." Aaliyah's hand hovered over one that seemed to hum in time with her heartbeat. A memory, perhaps, or a dream she didn't know she still carried. A burden, perhaps, a belief that no longer fits, or a sorrow too heavy to carry. She didn't choose yet. Not because she didn't want to, but because she was beginning to understand. This market was not about getting, it was about becoming. She wandered deeper. A young boy with stars in his hair handed out strings tied to invisible balloons. "These are hopes," he said, "and they float best when you believe in them." One child giggled as theirs tugged them gently into the air. Another traded tears for a balloon that smelled of warm cinnamon and bedtime stories. Elia took one, and though she couldn't see it, she felt it lift a small corner of her heart. Further along, a small stall made entirely of sand and sea glass offered laughter in tiny wooden boxes. "Pick one," said the merchant, an old man with eyes like shorelines. Elia opened a box and instantly heard the unfiltered giggle of her younger self echoing from somewhere deep inside. It made her eyes sting, though she didn't feel sad, just surprised, as though she'd found a long-lost friend. She kept walking. In another corner of the market, there was a mirror, tall and framed in old willow branches. It didn't show her reflection as she expected. Instead, it showed her as she was when she felt her truest self. Sitting beneath a tree at age 9, reading a book with her whole body relaxed and her eyes wide with wonder. She had forgotten that version of herself, and now it looked back with a gentle smile, saying nothing, only reminding. A voice nearby spoke. "Many pass this mirror and look away, but you stood and looked." Elia turned to see a figure cloaked in feathers and light. "Why?" she asked. "Because you're ready," the figure said, "and because you came not for goods but for truth." Elia didn't fully understand, not yet, but her heart did. She sat by a stall selling nothing but stories, spoken by an old woman whose voice seemed to weave itself into the very air. People sat in a circle listening, not just with their ears, but with their souls. Elia joined them. The stories weren't about dragons or treasure. They were about choices, regrets, quiet courage, and acts of kindness that saved someone's world even if no one else noticed. And in each story, she found a piece of herself. Time passed differently here. Maybe it slowed, maybe it stopped, or maybe it never mattered at all. Eventually, Elia stood once more and returned to the first stall, the one with the glowing bottles. She reached for the one that still hummed with her heart. I think I'm ready to let go of an old fear, she said. The woman nodded. Then take this with you, and remember what you leave behind makes room for what you truly need. And with that, the bottle was hers, not heavy, but full. When Elia turned to leave, the market seemed to sigh, not in sadness, but in satisfaction, like a chapter had been completed. The path home was no longer tangled. It lay open, clear, and welcoming. As she walked, her heart lighter and her steps softer, Elia didn't feel the need to rush. The market had given her more than memories. It had reminded her who she was beneath the noise of the world. She returned home not with arms full of goods, but with a heart full of light, a mind full of wonder, and a whisper in her soul that would guide her for the rest of her life. And so, if you ever hear someone say the words, "I go to the market," don't assume it's just for bread or fruit or milk. Sometimes it means a journey to the deeper parts of the soul, to a place where truth is traded gently and wonder never runs out. Elia's footsteps carried her further into the heart of the market of hidden things, where the air itself seemed to hum softly with stories waiting to be told. Here the light was softer, not just golden or silver, but colors that danced like fireflies caught between dusk and dawn. It was a place where the ordinary rules of time and space bowed respectfully to magic and memory. At the edge of the clearing, she noticed a narrow path, barely wide enough for one person, paved not with stones but with shimmering leaves that felt warm beneath her feet. Curiosity tugged her forward, and as she walked, she began to hear the faintest sounds, soft whispers woven into the breeze, voices that felt like echoes from faraway places inside her own heart. The whispers grew clearer, and Elia realized she was not alone. Figures emerged from the shadows between the trees, 4 companions, each carrying a story as unique as a fingerprint. The first was an old man with eyes like molten gold, his beard flowing like a waterfall of stars. He smiled kindly and said, "I am Orin, keeper of forgotten hopes. I have wandered many paths, carrying the dreams people left behind." Beside him stood a young woman with hair like autumn leaves and a laugh as bright as sunlight on water. "I'm Lila," she said, her voice like wind chimes. "I gather lost courage, the kind we hide from even ourselves." A tall boy, no older than Elia, with curious eyes that shimmered like the surface of a deep lake, nodded shyly. "I am Finn. I collect stories of kindness, small moments that change the world in silence." Finally, a gentle figure cloaked in soft blue light stepped forward. Her smile was calm, like the first moment of peace after a storm. "And I am Mira, guardian of new beginnings. I help those ready to start over, to walk fresh paths with hope." Elia's heart fluttered as they spoke. She realized the market was not just a place, but a meeting of souls, travelers who came to share, to heal, and to grow. The 4 companions invited Elia to walk with them, and together they wandered through the market's wonders. At a stall shimmering with crystal dew, Oren showed Elia a small box. "This holds a hope someone once gave up. Would you like to hold it?" Elia nodded, and as she opened the box, a warm glow filled her hands. She felt a gentle tug in her chest, a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope can quietly live on, waiting for a chance to shine again. Lila took Elia's hand and led her to a place where the air was thick with the scent of wildflowers and soft earth. "Here," she said, "we find courage not in loud acts, but in the quiet moments. Standing tall when no one's watching, choosing kindness when it's easier to turn away." Elia thought of the times she had been afraid, the moments she had doubted herself, and she felt a gentle strength bloom inside her, as if the courage Lila spoke of had been growing all along. Finn shared with her a story, a small kindness from a stranger that had changed the course of a lonely boy's life. As Elia listened, she realized that kindness was like ripples on a pond, reaching far beyond what the eye could see. Finally, Mira spoke softly. "New beginnings can be scary, but they are also full of promise. Sometimes starting over means discovering who you truly are beneath all the noise." Elia felt a tear slip down her cheek, not from sadness, but from the beauty of this truth. She knew she had been carrying too many fears, too many doubts. Here, among these new friends and these magical stalls, she was learning to let them go. Together, the five of them sat beneath an ancient tree whose branches stretched like open arms. The tree's leaves whispered stories of the past and songs of the future, wrapping Elia in a cocoon of comfort and hope. As the sun began to dip behind the hills, the market began to fade, its magic folding back into the earth until it would return again when it was needed most. Elia hugged her new friends, promising to carry their gifts with her: hope, courage, kindness, and the power to begin again. She walked back through the forest path, feeling the soft earth beneath her feet and the stars beginning to twinkle in the darkening sky. Her heart was lighter, her spirit brighter, and though she returned to the familiar sights and sounds of her village, she knew she was forever changed. Because sometimes the most ordinary journey, like going to the market, can lead you to the most extraordinary places. Elia's feet felt light as she stepped out of the fading market of hidden things. The path before her was bathed in twilight's soft glow, and the gentle hum of the earth beneath her feet seemed to sing a quiet song of welcome. Though the market had vanished like morning mist, its magic was alive inside her. A glowing ember nestled deep in her heart. As she walked back toward her village, the world around her looked both the same and wonderfully different. The trees she had passed 100 times before now seemed to bow with respect, their branches whispering greetings as if they recognized the change in her spirit. The birds sang sweeter songs, and the flowers along the way lifted their faces as if to smile at her passing. But Elia knew her journey was not yet complete. That night, beneath a blanket of stars, she sat by the fire with her family. She could have told them stories of the market, of glowing bottles and invisible balloons, of kindness carried like precious cargo. But instead, she chose to listen. To hear her mother's laughter, her father's quiet sighs, the soft breathing of her little brother as he slept. In those simple moments, Elia understood a secret the market had shown her. True magic lives not in faraway places, but in the everyday, in the smiles we share, the courage we find. When no one's watching, and the hope that lifts us when the world feels heavy. In the days that followed, Elia's life began to change in small but meaningful ways. She helped her neighbors with a new gentleness, offering a hand without expecting thanks. She faced her own fears, the ones that had kept her small, with quiet bravery. And every morning, as the sun spilled golden light across the hills, she whispered to herself, "I carry the market with me." One afternoon, as Elia walked through the village square, she noticed a young boy sitting alone on a bench, his face clouded with sadness. Remembering the lessons from her journey, she sat beside him and offered a smile, the kind of smile that says, "You are not alone." The boy looked up, surprised at first, but then something softened in his eyes. They talked quietly, and Elia shared a story, not of magic bottles or invisible balloons, but of the small kindnesses that had changed her heart. From that day on, Elia knew that the market's true gift was the power to see the magic in every person, every moment, every breath. And so the market lived on, not only in hidden clearings or whispered legends, but in the hearts of those who dared to believe that even the simplest journey can become the most extraordinary story. Because sometimes the most powerful markets are not the ones filled with treasures or trinkets, but the ones where we exchange kindness for courage, hope for fear, and love for loneliness. And every time Elia went to the market after that, whether for bread or for herbs or just to walk among the people, she carried that secret with her, like a bright light shining softly in the quiet corners of her soul. Days turned into weeks, and the village slowly settled back into its usual rhythm. But Elia's heart was still humming with the magic of the market of hidden things. Each morning, she woke with a quiet excitement, knowing that the world held mysteries deeper than anyone could see at first glance. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with streaks of pink and orange, Elia heard a gentle knock on her door. Outside stood Oren, the old man with golden eyes, holding a small, intricately carved box. "Tonight," he said softly, "the market will open again, but only for those who truly believe." Elia's eyes sparkled with wonder. She took the box from Oren's hands and opened it carefully. Inside was a tiny glowing seed, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. "This seed holds a wish," Oren explained. "Plant it beneath the oldest tree in the village when the moon is at its highest. But remember, a wish given to the earth must come from a place of kindness and truth." With a heart full of hope, Elia waited for nightfall. When the full moon bathed the world in silver light, she crept quietly to the ancient tree at the edge of the village square. The tree's branches stretched wide, as if ready to catch the moon itself. Elia dug a small hole in the soft earth and placed the glowing seed gently inside. She covered it with soil, whispering her wish. Not for gold or fame, but for the courage to help others find their own magic, just as she had found hers. As the moonlight poured over the spot, the seed began to shimmer, sending ripples of light through the roots of the tree. Around her, the village seemed to hold its breath, and, for a moment, the world was silent except for the soft hum of the earth. Then, from the tree's branches, a shower of tiny lights drifted down like sparkling fireflies. Each light floated toward a different home, a different heart, carrying a gift of hope, courage, or kindness. Elia watched with tears in her eyes, knowing that the market's magic was spreading, not just in faraway places, but right here, among the people she loved. The next morning, the village awoke to find small wonders everywhere. A forgotten garden blooming overnight, a lost child reunited with their family, an old quarrel forgiven with a handshake. The magic was real because the people believed in it and in each other. Ilya smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning. Because the market of hidden things was not just a place to visit. It was a way of seeing the world, with eyes full of wonder, hearts open to kindness, and hands ready to help. And so, whenever anyone in the village said, "I go to the market," they meant more than just buying food or goods. They meant stepping into a world where magic lived quietly in every act of love, courage, and hope. After the magical night, when Elia planted the glowing seed beneath the ancient tree, the village seemed to sparkle with new life. But the true magic, Elia realized, was not in the lights or the blooming flowers. It was in what the market had taught her about the quiet power hidden inside every person. One crisp morning, as golden light spilled through her window, Elia decided to visit the village market again, this time the usual one, where baskets overflowed with fresh fruits, fragrant herbs, and colorful cloths. Though this market was ordinary, she carried the extraordinary within her heart. Walking between the stalls, she saw the faces of the villagers, some tired, some joyful, some worried. She remembered the market of hidden things and the lessons it had given her. Courage, kindness, hope, and the power to begin anew. Now Ilya knew these weren't just magical gifts found in faraway places. They lived in the everyday moments and the simple acts that connected people. She approached the first stall, where old Marla was selling ripe apples. Marla's hands trembled slightly as she arranged her fruit, and Elia noticed the worry in her eyes. "Good morning, Marla," Elia said softly. "How are you today?" Marla sighed. "The harvest was not as good this year. I'm not sure how I'll manage to feed my family through the winter." Elia smiled gently, remembering the courage Lila had shared with her. "Maybe I can help you," she offered. "I know some villagers who have extra to share." Together, they spoke quietly, and soon a small group gathered, neighbors willing to share seeds, tools, and food. What began as a simple offer grew into a beautiful chain of kindness. Ilya realized that the courage to ask for help and the kindness to offer it were powerful magic indeed. As she walked on, she noticed Finn by the well, listening patiently to a young mother worried about her sick child. Finn shared a story, one he had collected at the market, about a village healer who used nothing but herbs and love to bring health back to those in need. Ilya joined them, and the mother's eyes brightened with hope. Together they gathered herbs and promised to care for the child. The warmth of shared stories and support wrapped around them like a comforting blanket. Later, Oren found Elia near the village fountain. "The market's gifts are strongest when they grow in the hearts of those who believe," he said. "Will you help us carry this magic forward?" Elia nodded without hesitation. "Yes, I will." The days that followed were filled with small miracles. A quarrel between two longtime friends ended with laughter and tears. A lonely widow found a new companion in a wandering minstrel. Children played freely in fields that once seemed dull and tired. Elia understood that the market was not just a place she visited once, but a lifelong journey, a dance between hope and action, between seeing the beauty in others and nurturing it with love. One evening, as the village gathered around a fire, Elia told the story of the market of hidden things. She spoke of the glowing bottles, the invisible balloons, and the tree of wishes. Her words were gentle but full of power, reminding everyone that magic is not something distant or rare. It is inside each of us, waiting to be awakened. The villagers listened, eyes wide with wonder, hearts open to the possibility that their lives could be touched by that same magic. From that day forward, whenever anyone said, "I go to the market," it became a phrase filled with meaning, a promise to seek not just goods but kindness, courage, and hope. It was a reminder that the greatest treasures are those we carry inside ourselves and share with others. Elia smiled, knowing that her journey had only just begun. The market of hidden things was always there, waiting quietly in the spaces between moments, in the gentle acts of everyday life, in the whispered stories of those who believe. And she, along with her friends Oren, Lila, Finn, and Mira, would walk that path again and again, spreading the magic of the market to all who were ready to see it.